Okay, let's unpack this. We're plunging today into one of the most persistent spiritual tensions you find across the ancient land of Bharat.
Right. It's this perceived, almost aggressive opposition between two major streams of spiritual practice.
Exactly. On one side, you have Santmat, the path of the saints, focused on this really rigorous inner ascent, transcendence, and what they call the divine sound current.
And on the other, you have Devi Upasana, which is, the path of devoted power. It embraces the divine feminine or Shakti and often pulls in elements of classical Tantra.
And for centuries, these paths have been seen as, well, conceptually at odds. It's created this massive intellectual and even practical roadblock for anyone trying to live an integrated spiritual life.
It really has. The popular caricatures are just so stubborn. Santmat always gets branded as dry, mechanical, too intellectual.
Completely theoretical, yeah.
And frankly, dismissive of the heart, dismissive of the power of devotion.
And the reverse is completely true for the Devi path, right?
Yeah.
It's often just simplified, seen as purely emotional, heavily ritualistic.
Maybe too invested in temporary blessings,
And lacking that rigorous, systematic blueprint for inner transcendence that the Santmat teachers insist is, absolutely necessary. It's like love without a map versus a map without an engine.
That's a perfect way to put it, and that's exactly the problem, the separation. Our sources argue pretty compellingly that this entire divide is a manufactured illusion.
An illusion. How so?
It stems not from some fundamental conflict, but from what they call partial vision.
Partial vision.
Right, so the core mission of this deep dive is samanvaya, a term that means harmonic integration. We're not here to try and force them together clumsily.
No, it's about genuine recognition. The sources say they speak, what was the quote, different grammatical dialects of the same ultimate reality.
That's the one, and that metaphor of dialects is so key.
It is. Because if you look at the fundamentals, the whole conflict immediately becomes, well, suspicious. How can a path that aims for the soul's absolute transcendent liberation like Santmat, how can it possibly succeed without acknowledging or engaging with or surrendering to the very operative force, the Shakti, that makes the movement possible?
It can't. You can pore over the most detailed maps of the Himalayas, but if you don't acknowledge gravity or the force required to actually climb, you're just reading a book.
Exactly. You're just an armchair mountaineer.
And that is the core paradox we have to resolve. Santmat is often categorized as nirgun exclusive, meaning it focuses solely on the formless, attributeless, transcendent aspect of reality.
Right. The reality beyond form.
But then a huge philosophical problem arises. If the ultimate reality is truly inert, formless, and absolutely static, how does movement happen? How does the soul, the surat, withdraw its attention from the 9 openings of the body and ascend through these mapped inner regions?
Good question. The ascent itself is proof of something dynamic.
The very existence of ascent, the fact of movement, proves the presence of an underlying dynamic power. And that power, implicitly, is Shakti. So we need to look at Santmat's position and figure out if its avoidance of the term Devi is a theological rejection
Or if it's a brilliant, strategic, and purely methodological choice.
That's what we're going to explore.
So let's start with that strategic choice in Section 1. Santmat's methodological silence on Devi, and contrast that with Devi's very real functional power. When we look at the core texts and the instruction set of the masters, the instructions are, incredibly specific and rigid.
They are. The focus is exclusively on practices designed for internal withdrawal.
It's all about Surat Shabd Yoga, the alignment of the soul, the Surat, with the internal divine sound current, the Shabd.
Absolutely. The system maps a step-by-step ascent through specific inner lokas or regions, all designed to dismantle your identity layer by layer. The ultimate goal is the complete transcendence of the mind and Kal.
And remind us, Kal is
the immense administrator of all time, causality, and manifest creation. The manager of the whole show, so to speak.
And central to this practice is the absolute relentless insistence
on withdrawing attention, right, from all the external stuff.
Exactly. The Bahirmukhi practices, the external rituals, the worship of physical forms, using external imagery. All the elements that Devi Upasana seems to celebrate.
Which is why it's so natural to assume that a path that says transcend form rejects the forms being transcended.
That's the logical leap everyone makes.
And that is precisely where the popular conclusion, the false divide, begins. But our sources argue that Santmat's position is explicitly methodological, not theological.
Okay, break that down. What's the difference?
It's not about denying the existence or the power of Devi. It's about ensuring the practitioner's consciousness doesn't get trapped. Santmat refuses to objectify Shakti prematurely or externally.
What do you mean by prematurely objectify? Give us an example of how that stalling happens.
Okay, so if you objectify Shakti, if you turn her into a specific, emotionally fulfilling, beautiful image or an intense feeling in the lower chakras, you risk stalling your attention and your consciousness right there.
Ah, I see.
And that place, the realm of mind, emotion, and astral visions, is still completely within Kal's jurisdiction. It's a high, beautiful prison.
A gilded cage.
Exactly. So the singular concern of the Santmat guru is laser focused. They're only asking one question. Does this practice move the soul inward and upward, beyond mind and Kal, or does it offer a blissful emotional reward that keeps attention stalled in a higher form?
That just reframes the entire critique.
Mm-hmm.
So if popular Devi worship, especially in its more diluted forms, emphasizes the emotional rasa or the visual beauty of the murti,
The form, yes.
then Santmat, as a surgical system of ascent, has to reject the form of the worship because of the risk of attachment, not the power behind the form.
That is perfectly put. It's a strategic withdrawal. It's like a surgeon refusing to use a comforting blanket that might accidentally contaminate the operating field.
I like that analogy.
Functionally, they can't deny the operating force. It's impossible. Even though the specific name Devi is often avoided, Santmat's internal texts are full of acknowledgments of this underlying dynamic force.
So it's there, just under a different name.
It's there as the movement, as the current, as the pull that magnetically draws the soul inward. They acknowledge that Nama, the sacred name or sound current that guides the soul, is functionally Shakti in a sonic, non-visual sound form.
And I'd argue the greatest evidence of this unacknowledged power is the figure of the guru itself.
Absolutely. The Satguru, the true teacher, is never seen as some self-generated force or acting by sheer personality. They function through an unseen power, a grace, dayo, or compassion that is constantly generating the conditions for the disciples' withdrawal and ascent.
And that grace, that ability to move the soul against the current of creation.
That is functionally dynamically Shakti, no question.
So if we step back, Santmat avoids the language of Devi because of the potential psychological traps, the anthropomorphization or the emotional attachment to a specific form.
Right.
But they still employ the functional power under other names, like Nama, Shabda, or Daya.
Exactly. They deny the worship of Devi as an external binding object, but they cannot and do not deny the functional force that governs the ascent.
Now, let's flip the telescope and look at the other side, because his failure to integrate is, as you said, a two-way street. What was the corresponding loss in the Devi traditions, especially in Tantra, that helped create this divide?
Well, modern Devi Upasana, at least in many of its popular expressions, suffers significantly because it often appears unaware of the precise inner cosmology and detailed mechanics that Santmat maps out.
They lost the map.
They lost sight of the strict boundaries of the lokas, the specific jurisdictions of Kal, and the mechanical requirements of Surat withdrawal. And this gives the unfortunate impression that the path of power lacks a sophisticated internal science of consciousness.
But the sources are clear. Historically, that impression is just wrong. Classical Tantra wasn't always just about external ritual.
Not at all. Not even close. Classical ancient Tantra possessed an incredibly refined inner science. They were masters of internal mapping.
What did they map?
The chakras and nachas, the intricate details of Kundalini energy ascent, the mechanics of nada, which is inner sound, and bindu, inner light. They mapped the precise transitions through various subtle realms. They had the map. It was a complete internal system.
So the issue wasn't an incompatibility between the original concepts. It was an internal simplification, an erosion over time that led to the paths just drifting apart.
Precisely. Over centuries, that high experiential focus just collapsed. The sophisticated practice of internal experiential ascent was tragically sidelined in favor of external, simpler, and often highly performative ritual.
And so the connection point, the Samanvaya, was lost.
It was. Tantra risked becoming purely ritualistic. Santmat risked becoming sterile and overly theoretical. Both in isolation became incomplete expressions of the whole truth.
That sets the stage perfectly for Section 2, the core reconciliation. We really need to address the confusion at the heart of the matter, which is this Saguin-Nirgun binary.
Yes.
Because if we can untangle why the divine can be both with form and without, the operational divide just collapses.
The standard and very flawed assumption is this. Santmat is purely Nirgun, formless, and Devi Upasana is purely Sagun, with form. But our sources strongly assert that this binary, when you apply it to the ultimate nature of Shakti, just does not withstand deep scrutiny.
Okay, let's start by clarifying Santmat's Mirgun. The novice, I think, often mistakes it for emptiness or a philosophical negation, maybe an inert vacuum,
Yeah.
something cold and dead.
And that misunderstanding is a huge philosophical error, a massive one. Santmat's Nirgun is defined as being prior to form, beyond attributes, beyond definition. But critically, it is not inert or devoid of potency.
If it were inert, nothing could happen.
Exactly. If the ultimate reality were truly inert, how could creation, movement, or even the impulse for liberation begin? The formless realm must contain the absolute potential for movement. It's the difference between a silent, dark ocean that is utterly still but full of potential, and an empty, silent vacuum that contains nothing.
And the same principle applies to Devi. She isn't just limited to the beautiful or fierce manifestations we see.
Precisely. To limit Devi to her forms is the exact mistake of the partial vision we talked about. She is described in the great Shastras as Sagun Nirgun Atmika, manifest when needed, withdrawn when not, and the very soul of existence itself. She is the principle by which movement, ascent, and transformation occur across all realms. There's that great quote from the Devi Mahatmyam, Yabadevi Sarvafuto Shakti Rupesastra. She abides in all beings as Shakti, as the operating force itself.
She's the continuous underlying presence, not just the temporary visual.
Yeah.
Let's pause on that, because this distinction is where the functional breakthrough happens. If we stop arguing over what she is defined as and focus entirely on what she does, the divide just vanishes.
This is the true point of Samanvaya.
The reconciliation is purely functional.
Purely functional. Santmat answers the question, Hey Chow W. How does Surat initiate withdrawal? How are the specific, sometimes hostile regions of the inner cosmos crossed? How is Kal's powerful domain bypassed and attention stabilized beyond the psychological confines of the mind?
So Santmat provides the detailed mechanics, the blueprint, the map.
The map. And Devi Upasana answers the question, WHO, who is the immense force that pulls Surat upward against the intense, overwhelming gravity of worldly attachment? Who acts as the ultimate protection and sustaining intelligence when your cognition fails and you're on the brink of dissolution in the void? Who governs the treacherous, sudden transitions between those vast inner realms?
So Devi provides the grace and the engine that moves you across the map.
It's a beautifully necessary complementarity. Think of it this way. Santmat gives you the detailed flight plan and all the technical checks for a vertical ascent.
Yeah.
Devi is the thrust of the engine, the unseen aerodynamic lift, and the continuous guidance system that corrects your course when the turbulence hits. You need both.
And if you separate them, you risk some major failures. Detail those risks again, because this is where the practitioner gets lost.
Okay, so if you try to execute the ascent mechanically using only the Santmat map, focusing only on technique and effort without acknowledging the operating grace that's actually moving you,
Yes.
the practice becomes dry, sterile, and hyperegoic. The seeker starts believing, I ascended by my effort, which is the surest way to stall in the higher realms of Kal. The ascent can even be reversed by the pride of the achiever.
Wow. Okay, and conversely, what about relying solely on emotional devotion without the map?
That seeker risks emotional stagnation. They stay in the warm, blissful, emotionally rich realms of the astral, believing that high feeling is the ultimate goal. They remain trapped in beautiful light and sound, but without the precise knowledge of how to exit Kal's jurisdiction, they just spin their wheels. They're mistaking a luxurious layover for the final destination.
So let's address a question that comes up from the critique. If the functional force is identical, why do the different names persist? Is it just cultural baggage, or does the chosen name, Nama versus Devi, does that inherently change the experience for the practitioner, for the sadhak?
That is a profound question, and the answer is yes, it absolutely shapes the experience. The persistence of the names reflects the chosen idiom of the path. When the force is named Nama or Shabda, it is experienced as pure objective current, a sound that pulls you. This discourages emotional attachment and egoic identification. It emphasizes a kind of mechanical reliance and precision.
An impersonal guidance system.
Exactly. But when the same functional force is named Devi, Shakti, or Ma, it is immediately relational. It is experienced as unconditional love, protection, fierce cutting. This encourages total surrender, Charanagati, humility, and the dissolution of the ego through love, not just through technique.
So both are necessary to outwit Kath.
Both are. But one uses the language of objective science, and the other uses the language of relationship. The functional identity is what links them. The force that pulls the soul upward is called Shabda by Santmat and Shakti by Tantra. The reality accommodates both idioms, but you, as the seeker, choose the emphasis that best suits your nature.
Now we move into the structural heart of this deep dive, Section 3, which is the stage-by-stage analysis of how Shakti actually operates within Santmat's inner cosmology. This is where we see conclusively that Santmat's silence on Devi is really an assumption of her presence and function at every single turn.
This is the operational proof of the synthesis, but let's just solidify that critical preface again. Devi is functional, not structural.
Okay, what's the distinction?
The lokas are regions. They are the geography, the structure of the inner creation. Devi is the force, the dynamic intelligence, and the engine that enables movement between these fixed realms. Without her, the map is just philosophical theory.
Got it. Okay, let's begin the inner climb with Loka 1, Pink Loka, the gross physical realm.
This is our current reality. The domain of the body, the senses, and attention scattered externally through the 9 doors. Santmat teaches that bondage here is absolute, maintained by deep inertia, tamas, and just sheer habit.
The soul is completely externalized, asleep.
Completely asleep to its true nature.
So what's Devi's primary functional role here before any formal practice has even begun?
Here, Devi operates as Jagrat Sakti, which means the awakening impulse. She doesn't appear as a vision or a goddess. She appears functionally as a profound, sustained discomfort with worldly existence.
That feeling of restlessness.
It's that inexplicable spiritual restlessness, the inner dissatisfaction, the feeling that there must be more, that has no logical external cause. This initial pull, this sudden, overwhelming gravitation toward a guru, or the path, or just the need for silence, that is her initial work.
It's the impulse that flips the attention from outward to inward.
Precisely. In Tantra, this initial divine will to turn inward is called Icha Ukti, the will to desire the transcendent. In Santmat, it's the initial activation of the Daya of Satguru. It is the force that destabilizes that deep inertia so the Surat can even contemplate turning inward. Without this initial Devi function, the map remains folded and the ascent never begins.
Okay, so as the attention begins to withdraw, we hit Loka 2, Andaloka, the astral region, or the region of the mind.
And Santmat views this as an extremely high-risk seductive zone. It's the realm of dramatic visions, intense lights, subtle inner sounds, encounters with lowered Devatas.
And profound emotional bliss bhava.
Yes. The danger lies in its sheer beauty and intensity. It is still entirely under Kal's jurisdiction, and seekers often get trapped here, mistaking that high astral feeling for ultimate liberation.
So if the seeker is pulled by emotion, how does Devi use that emotion to move them upward without letting them settle in the emotional realm?
She operates as Bhava Shakti, the emotional pull, but with a specific directionality. She intensifies devotion, granting the experience of rasa spiritual flavor tiers, intense, beautiful longing. She uses the specific form, the name, or the feeling as a magnetic hook to pull attention upward, like a continuous rope.
What?
But she deliberately withholds the final satisfying conclusion.
She provides the fuel, the attraction, but never the permanent rest.
Exactly. The functional power behaves like a mother who encourages her child to run forward by offering a toy, but refuses to let the child sit down and play with it until they reach the final room.
That's a great image.
If the seeker were allowed to settle in that emotional bliss, the ascent would just cease. Santmat rejects emotional clinging only because attachment to that high rasa is dangerous to the momentum of the inner journey, not because the devotion itself is false.
Okay, let's move to the point of genuine danger. Loka 3. The Pitendasandhi, the junction or entry point to what's called Trikuti. This is where the initial phase ends and the real spiritual journey begins.
This is the narrow gate. Santmat states this is where the mind's grip is fully challenged, and the Surat must execute a final, complete withdrawal. Kal's authority is weakened here, but his defense is fierce and, importantly, internal.
What does that internal defense feel like psychologically for the seeker?
Because the ego is staring at its imminent dismantlement, the resistance is massive and chaotic. Fear arises without any external cause, manifesting as intense spiritual doubt, profound internal contradictions, even physical illness.
And the violent surfacing of old, buried samskaras.
The memories, the fears, the binding habits, it's that sudden, terrifying urge to just quit the path entirely.
And this is where Devi steps in, not as a comforter, but as a cutter.
Functionally, she appears as Sakapavadini Shakti, the breaker of intention. She does not soothe the resistance, she cuts through the one who is resisting. This cutting force dissolves the complex web of self-sabotaging intentions and doubts that the mind manufactures to defend itself.
That immediately connects to the fierce forms we see in Tantra.
It is the Chinnamasta function in action, the self-decapitating force that severs the head of the ego and the binding self-intention. In Santmat, they just call this intensified guru kapa during the ultimate internal struggle. It is the unseen something that forces the seeker across the threshold when their own strength and psychological capacity are entirely exhausted.
And without this functional cutting force,
The seeker collapses psychologically or turns back right at the door.
surviving that cutting force leads the soul into Loka 4. Mahāsana, the causal threshold, also known as Trikuti proper. And this is often described as the most terrifying region of all.
It's Kal's deepest psychological stronghold. This is the region of the causal body, the bank of all impressions, all saskaras that define our individuality. It's described as a vast void, a terrifying, silent darkness where individuality completely collapses.
And the mind interprets this experience as literal annihilation.
Which is why the vast majority of seekers, even high-level meditators, turn back here.
So, if the realm is formless terror, how does Devi operate there? How can you surrender to a concept that has no form?
She operates as Mahashakti in her nirkara or formless mode. She is not a supportive presence, not a voice, not a visual. She functions purely as stability in nothingness.
Stability and nothingness.
She is the absolute, unbroken awareness that persists without any external or internal reference point. She's the field of consciousness that doesn't dissolve, even as everything else does.
So that silent support prevents a true, permanent psychological collapse.
It is the presence of Kali in her true, functional, formless aspect, the power that dissolves everything but the essential self. Santmat describes this as grace without an object, support without sensation, a pull without emotion. Our sources emphasize that those who survive this stage rely entirely on absolute radical surrender, never on technique alone. This is the stage where Santmat silently depends on the force of Devi the most, even while refusing to name her to the novice.
Because naming her would risk reducing her function.
Exactly.
Moving beyond the causal realm, we reach the final stage of Tal's domain and move out into Loka 5, the Parbrahm region.
Here, Kal's jurisdiction definitively ends. The struggle for transcendence is over. Duality dissolves into pure non-dual awareness. And at this point, Devi is no longer experienced as an other or even a separate functional force that's pulling you.
She is fully integrated into the process.
Yes. She becomes the very principle of Ascent itself, the cosmic intelligence, or Parashakti, by which the Surat knows precisely where to go next without any instruction. She is the continuity of awareness across the non-experience of the void.
And the different paths start to use similar language here.
The language finally begins to converge. Santmat calls this the pull of Satpurush, or the highest Anami resonance. Tantra calls it Parashakti, or Turiyatita Devi. The underlying functional reality becomes undeniable.
And then, the region beyond measure. Loka 6, Sakkandanami, the region beyond all description.
The mapping ends here. All vocabulary, all technique, all practice. And ultimately, the concept of the seeker itself just ceases.
So the question of Devi's function.
It dissolves. It dissolves because the one who ascended realizes they were never separate from her. Shakti is recognized as the self. This is the point where Santmat inevitably falls silent because the language of ascent has been fulfilled and only being remains.
The roadmap reveals a profound truth then. Santmat avoided the language of Devi only because using that language in the lower realms risked stalling the ascent through emotional attachment or premature objectification.
Right.
But functionally, not one step of the inner journey works without the dynamic force of Shakti.
The great synthesis is this. Santmat provides the precise structural map for the journey. Devi is the operating intelligence, the engine, the fierce grace that makes the journey possible. When the ascent becomes real and experiential for you, the philosophical debate simply evaporates. It becomes irrelevant because you realize you were being carried the entire time.
This intense functional clarity leads us naturally into Section 4. We need to resolve the most confusing hierarchical contradiction. In the source material, Santmat's administrator Kal versus Tantra's supreme goddess Mahākālī.
On the surface, this looks like a devastating contradiction. It really does.
How so?
Santmat warns Kal binds the soul, establishing him as the ultimate, albeit neutral, administrator of bondage and the cycle of rebirth.
The great adversary in a sense.
Yet Tantra proclaims Mahākālī devours even time, worshipping time as the ultimate divine mother, the source of dissolution. How can the villain and the hero share the same linguistic root and concept?
The sources explain that the word kala is used to describe two entirely different entities based on their ontological scale.
Precisely. Santmat speaks of functional time, the regulator and administrator. Tantra speaks of transcendent time, the primordial source. They're using the same grammatical term, but applying it to nested realities.
Let's dedicate some time to defining Santmat's kal. He's not a demon, which is a common misconception.
No, absolutely not. That's a huge error. Santmat's kal is the essential, neutral, and perfectly just administrator of duality. He is the governing principle of the entire system of nine, desire, causality, birth, death, and karma.
He's the law.
He is the law by which manifest creation functions, and he is philosophically necessary. He only binds the soul as long as the soul insists on maintaining its limited, dualistic identity.
So if he's a fair administrator, why all the fierce warnings?
Because Kal's greatest danger is not cruelty. It's his convincingness. He doesn't stop you from being religious or pious. He offers everything the ego could possibly desire within his system: high virtues, immense spiritual rewards, temporary heavens, great powers.
But these are all temporary.
All temporary, all conditional, and ultimately still within his domain. His genius is in stopping the soul from becoming free by offering highly attractive distractions. Santmat is teaching you how to outgrow his jurisdiction entirely, not how to fight him on his own turf.
Okay, now let's define Tantra's Mahākālī.
Mahākālī is time before time. She is the initial matrix, the fundamental potentiality from which all functional, linear time arises, and the force that collapses all time and existence back into herself.
So if Santmat's kal is movement within time,
The ticking clock, the manager of the cosmic bank.
then Mahākālī is the womb of time itself, the infinite power source that allows the clock to even exist.
Yes. This clarifies the statement, Kal trembles before Kali. It's a structural relationship, not a battle between good and evil.
It's necessary.
His authority exists inside her. They are not opposing forces at the highest level, they are nested principles. Mahākālī is the ultimate primordial source of time. Santmat's Tal is merely the regulator of time, operating within a specific jurisdiction.
So the ultimate goal, timelessness, is the same.
It's the same, but the focus is different. Santmat focuses on escaping the regulator. Tantra focuses on dissolving into the source that birthed the regulator.
And the sources strongly emphasize the fatal error made by many aspirants based on this confusion.
The error is misunderstanding the nature of bondage, which leads to the mistake of trying to fight Kal instead of transcending him. This manifests as a kind of spiritual immaturity, demonizing the world, cursing time, or rejecting physical embodiment as inherently evil.
But the reality is that Kal is not defeated by rebellion.
No, he is transcended by the dissolution of the one who identifies with him, by identity dissolution. And this is where the Mahākālī principle operates perfectly. She doesn't destroy the manager of time. She dissolves the one who is bound by the manager.
So the ultimate instruction remains identical, just translated through different idioms of surrender.
Yes. In the tantric idiom, you are instructed to offer even your desire for liberation into her mouth.
And in the Santmat idiom,
You are told to leave even the desire for mukti. Both demand the offering of the bound identity, the final sacrifice of the ego that believes it is striving. The resolution is complete. Creation is perfect. The cosmos is functional. Bondage exists only because of identification. Kal governs until identity ends. Mahākālī is the power of that ending.
we have to turn our attention now to Section 5, which addresses a common, and I mean catastrophic, failure among dedicated seekers, collapsing the distinction between Devatā worship and Guru Bhakti. The sources warn that so many sincere souls fail, not from lack of effort, but from this inner conceptual contradiction.
This is a critical functional distinction, and when it gets mixed up, the spiritual energy doesn't just become inefficient, it can actively cancel itself out. It prevents the soul from finding the exit.
Because Devatā and the Guru have fundamentally different roles.
Fundamentally different roles in the ultimate spiritual landscape.
Okay, let's define function 1, the Devatā, or the Isha, your chosen deity.
The Devatā represents a specific, highly intelligent cosmic principle or force. They operate within creation, governing particular realms, forces, and natural laws.
So what is Devatā worship for, then?
It's fundamentally about refining the heart, aligning your consciousness with a higher divine order, and burning through accumulated lower saskaras. It prepares and beautifies the vessel.
But their limitation is structural.
Crucially, yes. No Devata exits the soul from the structural framework of time and causality by default. They fulfill, refine, and respond beautifully and powerfully, but they operate within the system managed by Kal.
They give you a beautiful, perfect life in the prison.
A very good way to put it.
Now, function 2. The guru, but specifically in the Santmat sense of a Satguru.
The guru represents exit knowledge. Their authority operates across realms because they have already crossed Kal's jurisdiction and stand outside of it. Their function is radical, to destroy identification, to disengage the soul from the very rewards that bind it, and to guide the ascent beyond creation itself.
So the guru doesn't purify the vessel.
They empty it and show you the door out of the room entirely.
Why are both essential for the integrated path? Why can't we just choose one or the other?
A soul that engages in Santmat-style ascent without the humility and devotional softening that's provided by Ishta worship often becomes dry, intellectually arrogant,
And risks mistaking high-level intellectual insight for true, realized experience.
Exactly. And conversely, a soul that only engages in rich Devata Bhakti without the specific, precise guidance of the Guru's exit knowledge becomes directionless. They accumulate love and power, but they lack the necessary map out of the system. Devata worship makes the soul humble and receptive. Guru Bhakti provides the surgical tool for liberation.
Okay, now let's talk about the catastrophic error. The emotional transfer between these two roles.
This is the silent killer of practice. If the seeker treats the guru as a devata, as a wish-fulfilling deity, or a constant source of emotional comfort, they fall into emotional dependency and personality worship.
They seek the physical presence or the emotional rasa of the relationship rather than the instruction.
And critical discernment dies. Inner ascent stalls because the seeker is consuming the guru emotionally, rather than following the precise and often very difficult instruction that requires self-reliance.
Can you give us an anecdote of what that looks like in practice?
Sure. Imagine a guru gives the instruction. You must withdraw your attention to the third eye junction and focus only on the inner current for 3 hours daily, regardless of physical pain or psychological struggle.
A tough instruction.
Very. The devotee who treats the guru as a devata might instead spend those 3 hours thinking about the guru's physical form, weeping with love, and hoping the guru solves their external problems. They feel fulfilled, but they haven't moved an inch inward.
They expected the guru to fulfill their emotional needs, rather than act as the axis for radical internal movement.
Precisely.
And the reverse, treating the devata as the guru.
Here, the seeker expects exit knowledge from bhava, from emotion alone. They might have luminous visions or experience ecstatic love, but they mistake these high, beautiful astral realms for ultimate liberation.
A mistake we've already discussed.
Right. The devata will always respond to love, fulfillment, and devotion within the structure, but they will not, by default, provide the surgical knowledge required to dismantle the core identity that must be dissolved for ultimate freedom. It's mistaking a high spiritual reward for the end of the game.
This is the critical insight for achieving synthesis, then. The correct alignment.
The proper functional architecture is this. The devata is the object of love, the source of grace, compassion, and refinement. You melt your ego into the devata's ideal form. One holds you.
Okay. And the guru.
The guru is the axis of movement, the dispassionate guide and source of technical exit knowledge. You move with the guru's instruction, the other pulls you out of the system. You must never reverse these two functions.
So the ultimate synthesis being, Tantra without the structural guidance of the guru is often dangerous because the intensity of Shakti can just devour the unprepared sadhak.
And Santmat without the object of love, the Devata or Shakti, is incomplete, risking sterility and pride.
And both paths, at their peak, demand the exact same thing.
The total non-negotiable surrender of the ego, known as Sharanagati or Atmasamarpaya. The warning is clear. Love the Devata with your whole heart, because that is the essence of your being, but follow the Guru with your entire being, because that is the only way out of the framework. Do not confuse the one who transforms your life with the one who facilitates the end of life as you know it. Both are sacred, but they operate on different axes.
We arrive now at our final and most radical section, Section 6, which challenges every foundational concept of spiritual striving, the enduring truth of why Bhakti survives even liberation. This section asks the question that, frankly, no one on the path dares to ask. When all the goalposts are gone, what remains?
The traditional spiritual paths are based on 3 pillars: jnana, knowledge; karma, action; and bhakti, devotion, love. If the goal is liberation, the sources tell us something shocking. The first 2 collapse completely. And even the concept of liberation itself dissolves, leaving only bhakti.
Okay, let's dedicate some time to the collapse of knowledge, Jenna. Why is the most powerful tool of understanding ultimately discarded?
Knowledge exists purely because ignorance exists. It is a tool, a mechanism, a ladder. It's a necessary medicine for the disease of separation and identification.
And once the disease is cured,
The medicine is discarded. The Gita confirms that knowledge consumes ignorance entirely. There is no longer a need to know about the truth when you are absolutely and undeniably being the truth. Knowledge is a relational concept that dies by fulfillment. The realized state is not one of great knowledge. It is one of pure, unmediated being.
so the knowledge that got you there is no longer relevant to the state you now occupy.
Precisely. It's a transitional construct.
What about karma? We spend entire lifetimes dedicated to righteous action, accumulating merit. Why does action collapse?
Karma depends entirely on the kartabhava,
The sense of being a separate doer.
that binding, deeply entrenched sense. Liberation is universally defined as the moment the doer dissolves. When the identity is recognized as non-separate, and action is simply the flow of the cosmos through a specific point, there is no I act.
And therefore no karma, good or bad, to accumulate or exhaust.
Exactly. Karma is not transcended by accumulation. It is rendered entirely irrelevant by the cessation of the separate identity. The moment the sense of my effort dissolves, action becomes natural flow and karma ceases to bind.
And the most shocking collapse is liberation, mukti, itself. It's the highest goal, but it's still impermanent as a concept.
Mukti is a transitional state. It only exists in contrast to bondage. If you dissolve the concept of the prison, what does the concept of freedom even mean?
It becomes meaningless.
Liberation ends suffering, it ends the cycle of return, it ends striving, but mukti does not, in itself, create eternal relationality. The sources state plainly. It solves the philosophical problem of separation, but it doesn't answer the heart's ultimate capacity for love.
So if all those frameworks collapse, knowledge, action, and the very idea of being freed, what makes bhakti fundamentally different? Why is it eternal?
Bhakti is unique because it is not corrective, it is expressive, it does not arise because of ignorance, and it does not terminate at liberation. It is defined as ahetuki, which means causeless, and apratihata, uninterrupted.
It's not a solution to a problem.
It's the ultimate non-egoic nature of the liberated soul. It is the capacity for love and relationship, completely unburdened by self-interest.
So what survives absolute realization is not a concept or a static state, but dynamic relational love without the friction of the ego.
Exactly. The shift is from I love the divine to love flows unimpeded through this conduit. This is why fully realized beings still sing, still serve, still bow, not out of spiritual need, but because bhakti is their essential realized nature.
A liberated jnani dissolves entirely into silent being.
But a liberated bhakta remains by choice, maintaining a loving relationship with the reality that they simultaneously know themselves to be. Bhakti offers taste, rasa, where jhana offers silence. The bhakta does not fear duality, they play within it knowingly.
And this is where the Devi paths reveal their profound eternal secret. Devi is rasa, the ultimate flavor or essence itself.
The sources confirm that for the devotee, liberation is not absorption into a silent void, but belonging to that eternal dynamic rhythm of Shakti. Union does not necessitate the erasure of devotion, it elevates it to its highest, purest form. This is why the ultimate prayer in High Tantra is never for mukti.
Which brings us back to Santmat's silent admission. They map the technical, structural climb up to the summit of Anami, and then the vocabulary stops.
The language stops because the technical map has been exhausted. What remains cannot be described as path or technique. It is pure, prem causeless, uninterrupted love. Santmat bows to this final truth in silence, acknowledging the supremacy of that relational dynamic.
The sources offer a provocative conclusion here. If the desire for liberation is a prayer that ends the seeker, the relationship, and the play,
then the safest prayer is keep me yours. This is the ultimate intelligence. Because mukti ends you, but bhakti keeps you alive as a willing participant beyond the end of all striving. You will not remember the complexity of the mechanics that freed you. You will only remember whom you loved. And that, the sources conclude, is the only essential truth worth surviving eternity.
So what does this monumental deep dive mean for you, the learner? We have methodically mapped this spiritual landscape of inner ascent and devotional power and found that the opposition between the two streams is, well, experientially entirely false.
The integration, the samanvaya, provides the complete picture. Santmat maps the latter, detailing the how, the Surat Shab Yoga, the lokas, the withdrawal from call.
And Devi is the force climbing the ladder.
The who, the operating intelligence of transcendence, the Shakti that functions as discomfort, as protection, as cutting, as stability, and as the continuous magnetic pull at every single stage.
The final, integrated working model, which is essential for successful practice, is this. Adopt Devi as your Ishta, the object of total love and grace, providing the relationship and humility that sustains the heart.
And utilize Santmat as the inner mechanics, the map, and the precise discipline, guided by the non-negotiable instruction of the Guru.
Love of the Deva with your whole heart. Follow the Guru with your whole being.
And when your ascent becomes a tangible reality, the philosophical debate ends because you realize that the map and the engine are two absolutely necessary and complementary aspects of the same single reality. Where Santmat ends its description in silence, Devi begins as eternal presence.
Where Devi dissolves into formlessness, Santmat calls it home.
That's it.
Our sources leave us with a deeply profound thought that summarizes the primacy of love over knowledge and action. The most dangerous prayer is to ask for liberation, because it ends the one who is striving. The safest prayer is simply, keep me yours.
If knowledge, karma, and mukti all ultimately dissolve into obsolescence, leaving only relationality without ego, then we leave you with this final burning thought. Perhaps the true measure of spiritual success is not defined by what state you achieved, but entirely by the nature of the relationship, the bhakti that survived the end of all striving, becoming the eternal flavor of your reality.
Something to mull over until our next deep dive.